Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to GP Blog. It's US Grand Prix weekend. Lewis Hamilton has been disqualified. Toby, I think it's fair to say we were both about to go to sleep last night when the news broke that Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc had been disqualified, and I just think it's a complete and utter shambles.
It was mental. It kind of just popped out of nowhere. When I first saw it, it was a message in our work chat. Didn't really know what was going on. Didn't really know if there was too much behind it. And then we woke up this morning and confirmed that they were disqualified, and Hamilton and Charles Leclerc both lost their podiums. It's just mental. We don't really know too much about it. You might know more than me, but it was something to do with the plank and the wear on the plank, I believe, which it baffles me that they've even thought to look at that, but they must have had some data behind it.
So, from my understanding, which is very limited, the tech side of things is not my forte, let's say. But from my limited understanding, is the FIA and the stewards or whatever carried out a random check on Leclerc and Hamilton's car. They found that the skid plank was there was too much wear on the skid plank, which made it illegal. It was like too much damage effectively. So from where the car had scraped along the floor on a bumpy track, bumpy weekend with only one practice session, it's sort of difficult to read. So basically, the cars were deemed illegal, and yeah, that's that. However, in the FIA statement, they literally acknowledged that because of the nature of the weekend, with it being a sprint race weekend, one practice session, the cars didn't change all weekend because they were in parc fermé from qualifying on Friday night. Which, if they don't know there's something wrong with it, they can't fix it. Because I can't, like, they've had one practice session to work this out, and all of a sudden they're now being punished over 2 days later, for something they couldn't change all weekend because the FIA won't allow it. Like, this is what baffles me, is that that's what baffles me, is the fact that because of the FIA's and the F1's stupid parc fermé rule, that you can't change it after Friday on a sprint race weekend, it's now completely screwed over Mercedes and Ferrari. I've got a lot of sympathy for them here because I don't think it's their fault at all. It's a bumpy track. That's been a massive feature of this weekend, was the fact it was bumpy. They've therefore had increased wear on their skid planks, which they wouldn't normally experience because they don't always race it as bumpy tracks, and as a result, they've been punished for it because it's now illegal. And what even baffled me even more was the fact that the FIA admitted in the document that it was because of the nature of the sprint race weekend and a bumpy track.
So to me, it's just mental.
It's a very odd scenario, isn't it?
Very odd. You can say that again. Like, I think someone mentioned that in the past, teams have taken a pit lane start for the sprint race in order to change the height of the car. But if they don't know about it and they've not deemed it illegal until Sunday night, then what are they meant to do? Like, nobody knows. And I just think it's a shambles. And I think I'm going off on one, but it's like harsh on Hamilton and Leclerc for a start, and it puts fans off. Like, nobody's got any idea really why Leclerc. We do know, but there's no logic to it. Nobody understands the logic to why they've been disqualified. And it just puts new fans off because it's so confusing. And that's a completely other subject. I just think it's a mess. And Hamilton possibly could have won that race. And then you're disqualifying him. I don't know what else you make of it.
I mean, you summed it up pretty well there. There's not really too much for me to add, I don't think. But it was just, like I said, we found out late last night that it might happen and then woke up this morning to it happening. So
yeah,
surely there could have been a bit more clarification. Like you said, most fans probably don't know why they got disqualified or the proper ins and outs of it.
I'd feel less strongly about it if they'd dealt with it on Friday or Saturday night and said, look, your car or like giving them some warning. Your car's very low. Pick it up a bit, like something, or just because the fact they couldn't change their car from Friday, there's nothing they could do about it. They were destined to take this penalty after qualify. They were destined. There was no way they weren't getting disqualified after qualifying on Friday. There was no way. It was physically impossible because they couldn't change their car. They couldn't do anything about it. All of a sudden, gets to the end of the race on Sunday, and it's, oh no, your skid plank is worn out too much. We can't do anything about it. What are they meant to do? And I'd love to know. I'd love to know if Mercedes or Ferrari had any inkling about this happening. Because Toto Wolff came out after and spoke to Sky about the race in general. He seemed really upbeat, which to me suggests they had no idea this was coming.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. They probably weren't warned, probably had no kind of idea at all, and then it's just popped out of nowhere. And I was thinking then it probably ruined Mercedes' weekend more so than Ferrari, because at least they'll have Sainz on the podium now. But in the whole scheme of things, it doesn't really work out because they're still both losing points.
Yeah, McLaren are the big winners from it, really, because Norris gained a place up to P2.
Williams are the biggest winners.
Well, yeah, Williams. Logan Sargent's first F1 points at his home race, and he didn't even get to celebrate it.
Yeah,
because of
the only time he could celebrate was a nice selfie on his way out of Austin, which is really quite annoying and really unlucky as well. But then also lucky because he did get the point.
He did get the point. That's great. And I'm really pleased for Logan because I think he's been improving week on week. But, like, you look beyond it. You're not just spoiling it for Mercedes and Ferrari who have been disqualified. You're spoiling it for Logan Sargent, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, who have not had the opportunity. Like, Lando Norris would have happily taken P2. He was so down after P3. He'd have happily taken P2. You've spoiled it. You've just spoiled the whole moment. You've taken that moment away from Mercedes fans. It's a bit like VAR in football. You've taken that emotion and that moment away from so many individuals, the fans, which in America are always good. Like, the COTA crowd is arguably my favourite on the calendar, even if the race circuit is terrible. The fans are incredible. And I just think that is what's wrong with F1 for me, is they're too complicated for their own good. Like, on this occasion, what I would have... I've got no idea if this would be correct or whatever, but what I would have done, I would have said, look, it's an exceptional weekend, it's a sprint race on a bumpy track, you've had a bit more wear on your skid planks, you've not been able to change a car since Friday, here's a 100 grand, 200 grand fine or whatever, that's peanuts to them, get on with, like, don't do it again, make sure it doesn't happen again. Otherwise you're just ruining so many, not just Mercedes and Ferrari's race, you're ruining other people.
That's the brutality of F1 though.
I just think it's nonsense. Like, I feel quite strongly about it because I think this is where F1 shoots itself in the foot. Like, you draw in all these new fans with Drive to Survive and then you just trip them up with something completely ridiculous. But Hamilton could have won that race on a slightly different subject. Hamilton could have and probably should have won that race.
Yeah, if things went his way and Mercedes pitted him a few laps earlier, and then if he didn't get caught up so much by, I believe it was Leclerc and Norris. Definitely Norris. I think it was Leclerc out of the two Ferraris. If he hadn't got caught up by them, he would have... Well, I mean, what was the time gap at the end to Verstappen? 1.3?
Yeah, it was coming down by a lot each lap.
That was 3 and a bit 2 laps prior. So if he'd had 1 or 2 laps more, he probably would have got to him, and then we would have seen a battle for first place on probably the final lap, which would have been insane.
Yeah. It would have been nice. Hamilton versus Verstappen all over again. That's what we've been crying out for, and that's what I thought we were going to get. All weekend it looked like that's what we were building up to. And unfortunately, Mercedes shot themselves in the foot, which is not like Mercedes, or it is like Mercedes of the last 2 years. But, yeah, it was not the greatest of races, but we had a bit of action. There wasn't a single safety car or yellow flag or session delayed all weekend because there was nothing happened. But the racing on track was okay. It wasn't incredible, but it was okay. The sprint race was shocking.
Yeah, the sprint race was one to easily forget. The race itself was okay. The start was quite exciting, but Verstappen undercut Lando Norris and, he tried to undercut Lando Norris, but then still managed to gain like 3 seconds. He didn't overtake him, but then just overtook him on the racetrack itself because the Red Bull's too quick. And overall, I think it's quite a disappointing weekend, and it's not particularly good for the US as a whole, with Miami being very mid, this weekend being okay on track, but the sprint was rubbish. So Vegas really has to do a good job to try and bring this back in for America.
Yeah, Vegas needs to drag it back for America because Miami was very, very forgettable. This one, fairly forgettable, especially in terms of the sprint race, the whole sprint race concept.
I mean, even the Sky commentators were saying that it was one of the worst sprint races and that they thought it was boring whilst the sprint race was going on. I think that sums it up quite well.
Yeah, I think it does sum it up quite well. But Toby, that's all we've got time for. Mexico, we're hoping for a bit more fun, aren't we? So we'll be back next week, but until then, catch you next time.